Welcome to A&B Horror Movies. I'm Aaron, and I'm joined today by Tim from the Average Reviews podcast and the organizer of the Dread broadcast. And we are very excited to talk with Jennifer Reeder today. Jennifer, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. We can't wait to talk with you about your films, especially your brand new film called Perpetrator. But before we get to that, you are a director, a writer, a producer. You worked on the framing segment in VHS 94 called Holy Hell. You also wrote and directed Knives and Skin and Signature Move, and you directed Night's End, the Shudder original film about a haunted apartment, which I just rewatched this week.
Mhm.
I'm a fan. So let's talk about Perpetrator first. So it's a coming of age movie about a shapeshifter, and you
Mhm.
incorporate elements of horror, comedy, surrealism, and it's an exploration into the unusual. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Code Massacre, level bloodbath.
You're gonna get us all killed.
Most of you are going to die today.
Girls, girls, girls.
Hi, Principal Burke.
This is the second time you three have been killed this semester. Have you ever been shot here at school before today?
Danger lurks around every corner.
You have a heart condition. I've never heard one like yours. It's like you have two hearts. Tell me what happened. I heard this girl crying out for me. She was pulling me closer and closer. We have to find that girl. You are one in a long line. Ferocious, repulsive, magnificent. He took everything he could from her. He's gonna do that to us too. She's alive. I just don't know where she is. I could feel her blood leaving her body. We are all going to survive this. You have to be okay with the pain and the blood.
So my first question for you, before we get to Perpetrator, is you made the film Knives and Skin that I mentioned. Can you tell us a little bit about that movie and how Knives and Skin influenced Perpetrator?
Yeah. So yeah, Knives and Skin, we shot it in 2018. It came out in 2019. Knives and
Mhm.
Skin is kind of the mothership of a bunch of short films that I had made leading up to it, where I was kind of experimenting with um, sort of genre adjacent, you know, sort of storylines. Uh, Also sort of mystical teen noir
Yes.
visuals or like an underlying current,
Mhm.
people singing, you know,
Oh,
not
I
not a
loved
music,
it. Yeah,
not
it's
like a
so good.
not in a musical way, although I think probably maybe with the amount of singing that happens in Knives and Skin, at the end of the day, it could be considered a musical. And so I'd been
That's true.
so Knives and Skin is kind of a mothership to a lot of the short films that I had made, which are standalone. I mean, they had screened at Sundance and Berlin and the London Film Festival, etc.
Mhm.
But they were all a way for me to also kind of experiment with sort of my voice and my vision, which maybe is kind of particular. So, with Knives and Skin, which we shot here in Chicago, that's where I'm based.
Mhm.
It was a really, radical experience, and it was made entirely outside of any kind of studio system. So we sort of got to do, whatever we wanted to do, which I think is really evident in the film. And I know this is a sort of a bold statement, but I feel like even post Knives and Skin, there are a lot of films that sort of like owe their popularity to something like Knives and Skin, which was made
Mhm.
in this sort of like very under the radar kind of a way, and allowed other, filmmakers to really sort of like flex their weird. And then
Yes,
when
absolutely.
I when I was so maybe I said this already, but like Knives and Skin premiered in 2019 at the Berlin Film Festival, and
Mhm.
after that, one of the or the company in charge of the foreign sales, What the Films, that guy who's in charge of What the Films, Greg Chambay, who was based in Paris, now he's based in LA, said, what do you want to do next? And I said, well, I just rewatched I both iterations of Cat People, and
I just did that in the last few months too.
right.
That's
And I
so
said,
awesome.
and I
It's
said,
amazing the difference of those films,
yeah,
right?
yeah, totally.
Anyway, go on. I interrupted you. I couldn't
No,
help
no, it's fine. It's fine. And I said, and I've been kind of thinking about the way
Mhm.
that people have been talking to me around Knives and Skin, about my experience working with like teenage girls, and they sort of say like, how is it working with so many teenage girls? And of course, I say like it's awesome, but I realized that for the person asking the question, that it was like their worst nightmare, to walk onto a set with 22 teenage girls on set. And so it just, I mean, it hadn't, I mean, it had occurred to me, but maybe not in such a kind of a plot line for a film way that
Yes.
I thought, gosh, we are a culture who's obsessed with youth and beauty among young women in particular, and we do everything that we can to kind of disrupt their evolution. So I thought, like, what if we met a kind of wild and out of control teenage girl who
Hmm.
became wild and out of control. And I say wild and out of control, that phrase in particular, because I think that oftentimes that's adults use that term, not to sort of like, you know, recognize a young woman's agency, or even like a child girl's agency, but to
Hmm.
sort of diminish it. That's not a good thing, to be a wild and out of control girl. Um,
Yes.
and so I thought, like, God, what if we meet this kind of wild and out of control girl who actually becomes wild and out of control? And that, of course, is the most specific germ of any kind of shapeshifter story. So that idea combined with like having rewatched Cat People, I said to Greg, I said, I really want to do this kind of coming of age shapeshifter story, sort of a modern, maybe even Cat People, and he was like, oh, I love Cat People, and so he said, I want to help you make that film. And he did. He's one of the producers of Perpetrator. So, and of course, that was
Excellent.
in like the spring-ish of 2019. And I had written a draft of the script that kind of was ready to circulate in like March of 2020, and we all know what happened in March of 2020-ish, so it was like a while
Oh,
then to sort of
yes.
like rethink the script, rethink the story. But they're very related. I mean, I don't think that they're more like cousins than they are sort of like sisters. But they are, they're definitely related to Perpetrator and Knives and Skin.
Similar tone.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Perpetrator kind of goes more in like the body horror, and there's a
Yes.
lot more blood. Um,
And it's and
but
it's less genre adjacent. Like I do think that Knives and Skin is more of a kind of conceptual film, in the sense that like genre is like sort of like it kind of knows what it is. It sort of
yeah.
uses genre to kind of tell the story, rather than I think Perpetrator, I really tried to just like make an actual genre film. And then of course, as you mentioned,
Mhm.
in between Knives and Skin and Perpetrator, yeah, I did the wraparound for VHS 94, and
Fantastic.
I did Night's End, and both of those were, just came out of, they were both shot within like a 4-month period of time
Mhm.
in 2021, when I was like, we're never gonna make films again. Everything
Yes.
is,
Yes. Or go to the grocery store again.
yes, yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, so I would say that the VHS project, I mean, David
Yeah.
Bruckner was attached to do the wraparound, and he got called away to do Hellraiser, a little tiny,
Okay.
remake of a
I,
film.
I think our viewers may have heard of that. Yes.
Right. And so they came to, the producers came to me and said, would you want to do the wraparound? I said, yeah, of course. Like I love the VHS franchise, but I'd never done a found footage film.
Mm.
And yet it was also a project where the train had already left the station, so Ryan had already shot his, Simon had already
Mhm.
shot his, Chloe had already shot hers. I think Timo was getting ready to shoot. And so Um, I it was an interesting challenge in in that regard. And then yeah, Night's End was a project that came to me from the playwright, Chicago-based playwright Brett Neveu, and we were like,
Yes.
maybe we could just shoot this on our phones, you know? And
Mhm.
but then I said, let me just check in with Sam at Shudder just to see if maybe this is something. I wasn't even thinking that Shudder would want to come to board it on board rather, but just to sort of see like, is this an interesting
Yeah.
script?
Yeah.
Like, is this like, is this something that could live in the world? And he said, let me pass this, by Emily and other people, and then they came back and said like, yeah, look, we're going to help you make this film,
Mhm.
which never happens then, and it's still like it almost never happens now. So, but it was it was cool. So to have like
It's a
all of those films, they're different. I mean, Perpetrator and Knives and Skin are the ones who are related, and then we've got these little
most
like
similar for
we
sure.
got little neighbor films, in VHS and Night's End for sure.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Before I let Tim ask a question, I don't want to forget to mention that your films are streaming on Shudder,
Mhm.
Perpetrator, Knives and Skin, as well as Night's End, because I rewatched them all in preparation for this discussion.
And
So I
VHS, they're all on there right
and
now.
VHS, of course, the Shudder
Yeah.
original Shudder films. All right, Tim, I'll let you ask a question.
Yeah, so you mentioned your voice and your vision when it comes to your films. Are there sort of unwritten rules that you follow, or do you trust your gut? How do you express your voice and your vision and stay true to that through a variety of different films?
That's such a good question because I think that I always like I think as the films have gotten maybe the stakes have gotten higher, it's
Hmm.
been harder to convince the other people involved that I sort of know what I'm doing, that I can that my fans will like continue to find the frequency into my films and that new fans will find a frequency into my films. Um, you know, I feel like I'm just always pushing against this this phrase of like commercially viable, more commercial, more
Hmm.
commercial. And I just think that we don't, um, that doesn't, that can't define how stories are told, because
Mhm.
we as the storytellers, you know, our audiences tell us like, oh yeah, that's the new we love this film and this is the new way that we're going to, rethink horror. So, or, speculative fiction or whatever it is that is leaning into the fantastical, let's say.
Yep.
Um, and but sometimes I have to kind of like sneak it through, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, yeah, well, I'll rewrite that scene. We'll figure it out. We'll make it a little bit more normal or whatever. And then, I shoot it anyway, and then it totally works. Some people are like, wow, that's, it's so uncanny and interesting when
Yeah.
that little moment happens. Um, so yeah, I feel like it's a little bit of reminding the people involved that I have a track record of making weird moves that people are into, and also like convincing people that it's like it's okay to that, like not everybody's gonna like this, and that's be fine. Like we're not, if we're going for sort of like everybody's got to like it, then you're doing it wrong. That we just 100% do not live, in that kind of a world. We live in a kind of a world where some people love cilantro and then some people think it tastes like soap, and that's it. Like or whatever.
Yep.
We could expand on that. We could make it more kind of like
Yes.
we can make it more um like polarizing politically, but we don't have to go there. But we really know that like we just do not live in a world where everybody likes the same thing all the time. Um,
Mhm.
and uh, I mean, sometimes it is when I'm writing and shooting and cutting, sometimes it is an instinct. I mean, I feel like I probably on set laugh at my own jokes first, and some people are kind of like, "What are you laughing at?" I'm like, "Oh, that line is hilarious. And I'm sort of like, all right, you know. But I do also
Love that.
but I do also
Yeah.
tend to surround myself with people who um again kind of get my frequency, you know. So you don't want to bring people on board because they've produced films that have been, you know, that have done, you know, really well commercially, whatever that means. Or you don't want to, you know, cast some super visible actor if they don't kind of understand or like the story. And that's happened before. I mean, I've interviewed actors before who were like, well, I don't really like horror films, but you know, I read your script. Or I have not cast actors who have said, um, well, I don't really understand what's happening in the film, but I want to work with a female director or whatever. You know, you just have to, you know, you politely decline, and you surround yourself with people who you share a creative brain with. And that's actually not that
Mhm.
hard. That's not that hard to do. Um, but it's also not that hard to, well, actually it is hard to do, to sort of say, trust me, especially if you're a woman um, working in genre, you know, even though there are so many more women working in genre right now. And I would say that, like, you know, the world's most beloved monster, which is, you know, Dr. Frankenstein's creature. I mean, that was invented by a
Mhm.
teenage girl, Mary Shelley, you know, and yet there's some kind of
For sure.
gatekeeping that happens when women are kind of like, I mean, women have been stalked and killed in so many horror films. Why can't we kind of like reclaim this territory? But there is still like a kind of
Absolutely.
like a trust gap, you know, where I have to sort of say like, okay, here we go again. You know, like I think people will like this film, this story will find, you know, will find an
Yeah.
audience. And I tend to work with the same crew, the same production designers, the same cinematographers, the same script supervisors, uh, because we all really do share this brain, and you get into this kind of like synchronicity. And if I'm sort of feeling doubtful, I can kind of look to one of them and they can say like, no, no, it's good. Or I can sometimes if I'm feeling too puffed up, they're kind of like, this is not working. You know, I'm like, okay, 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 okay. All right, let's rethink this.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Bounce
mhm,
ideas off, get
yeah.
feedback. If you're on sort of similar wavelengths, then I could see
Mhm.
how that would help. So taking that one step further, you know, speaking to the people that you do work with on your films, I want to ask you about the casting process
Mhm.
because Alicia Silverstone is in this. Christopher Lowell plays
Mhm.
Principal Burke, and
Mhm.
he's fantastic.
Mhm.
And I hope I say her name right. Kia McKiernan plays Johnny.
Kaya McKirney.
Kaya, okay, I
Mhm.
knew I would say it wrong.
No
Kaya
problem.
McKiernan, very talented actors. What was
Mhm.
it like casting and also working with them all on Perpetrator?
Well, I'll tell you, and you know, I'll talk to Kaya first because she was, you know, Johnny was our lead or is our
Mhm.
lead, and so we knew we had to, you know, I wanted to attach her first, and I interviewed a lot of really amazing, you know, young actors for that part, and Kaya was the first one who engaged with Johnny on a very kind of personal level. So she said, you know, like I am a mixed race woman, I am a queer woman, I am an adopted woman. So she was like, I totally get shapeshifting, you know,
Oh, cool. I love that.
in a more
Wow.
kind
Yeah.
of like
Yeah, I don't think I've ever met anyone who would say, I get
mm-mm.
shape shifting.
Yeah,
That's
she was like, I
amazing.
get, and I
Right?
guess, you know, you could sort of call it like code switching or all sorts of ways
For
that
sure. Yeah.
sometimes we
Yeah.
do that. But
Mhm.
she understood shape shifting. You know, there's some aspect of shape shifting in Perpetrator that's also kind of a metaphor for how girls navigate the world. And she
Mhm.
also understood in her own skin how, you know, how she herself is a sort of a shapeshifter whose identity is just really layered and complex, and yet, you know, from the outside, like she doesn't often get to sort of, you know, determine how people identify her, which I
Mhm.
think is very common for all sorts of people. I mean, we just also still kind of live in a world where people are kind of like, you're that, you're this, you're that. And then I don't want to have to deal with like
Yeah.
all the layers of your identity. And yet,
Mhm.
which is such a way to again, to kind of diminish, someone's, personhood. So I loved
Yes.
that. And she grew up in Chicago also and we were going to shoot it in Chicago. So it was really nice to have her also just want to come back and
Yeah.
spend some time with her family while she was shooting it. And then yeah, casting Alicia was so cool. Like I loved her. I
Mm.
actually wanted to work with her for Knives and Skin. So she was on my radar. She had been on my radar for a while. Shudder loved her, the idea of her also. And so we sent her the script, and she had not done any real genre stuff. I mean, she,
Mm.
Batgirl is fantastical or whatever, but it's not quite this. And so when I knew that she had read the script and that she wanted to talk to me, I was super psyched and tried to be, real cool as a
Oh, I
cucumber.
bet. Yeah.
But she is so funny and so smart, and she really um just got into the material of the script, and once she was attached, she would um send me like little voice messages every other day asking questions about the script, asking questions about Hildy.
Mm.
Like she just um I was just so impressed with someone who has made so many films that she did not, and this is in terms of like the budget, a really small film, and she had to come to Chicago for 5 days or 7 days or whatever, Um,
Mhm.
and she took it so seriously, and she was just super lovely on set. We shot here in it was March, and it's very cold here, and some of the sets were really uncomfortable. The apartment that we were the her Hildy's apartment had no heat and no running water. So in
Mm.
March in Chicago, it was freezing. She did not complain one time. She
Oh my
didn't
gosh.
complain. This was not a set that had trailers. She did not have a trailer. I mean, she interacted with like everybody all the time, and something else that I think that we also take for granted sometimes is like she was so professional on set. Not that like she wasn't not appropriate or something like this, but
Sure,
she like we
sure,
we
sure.
we could give her like a whole table of props, and she would do the exact same thing with every take, and she knew exactly where her light was, and she knew like
Mhm.
where her scene partner's light was. And where I think that where I love working with theater actors, and Kaya had done more theater than film, and so Kaya would kind of move around and like miss her own light, or she would sort of like get the props all mixed up, which I know drives an editor crazy. And Alicia was just like, got it, was just so consistent. It was kind of incredible. Yeah, it was kind
Yeah,
of incredible.
she's perfect in it.
Yeah,
Perfect casting and
and then Chris
yeah.
Lowell was just kind of
Mhm.
like, we cast him actually. We had cast somebody else who had to step off once we started shooting
Mm.
to go to do it, to return to a show. And so we reached out to Chris, and he called me, and he was like, "Who are you, Jennifer Reeder? Like, this is a weird script." And I was like, "What does that mean? Like, do you want to do it or not?" Because like, we got our,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he was like, "Oh, hell yeah. Like, I'm coming to Chicago to make this weird film for you." And
That's
he
fantastic.
was also totally like in it to win it. And I just love that he is this kind of, charming, sort of, handsome principal of like a private school, and then, also has sort of like villainous tendencies.
Yes. Creepy too. Creepy.
Yes. And then everybody else, all the other casting, the woman who plays the Marcy, the nurse with the whole wrapped up face.
Mhm.
Yes.
She is an ensemble member of Steppenwolf Theater, which is a very, very, very well respected theater company in the US that happens to be here in Chicago. And Tim Hopper, who plays Johnny's dad at the beginning, also a Steppenwolf
Yes.
ensemble member. So we really filled in the rest of the cast with like some of the most remarkable Chicago theater actors who I've worked with before, and they were kind of like, "I'll do whatever you want," you know?
That's amazing. The final product speaks for itself. Another thing before I forget, congratulations on the Arrow video edition of Perpetrator that's coming out. I pre-ordered a copy already. I can't wait to
I
get
did.
that.
I did too. I mean, I think that they'll probably send me some, but it was really fun to kind of like pre-order my own
Yes,
Blu-ray.
absolutely. Yes, yes. So I love that.
Yeah. So you mentioned working with the same team from movie to movie. How hands-on are you with each department, or do you trust their creative freedom? Are you, I don't want to say controlling is not the right word, but do you have a specific vision and you trust them to execute it, or, you know, or they have some of that freedom there?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I like to send the department heads the script and I mean then it's a little bit of a conversation, that always happens. So with Audrey Searwatt, who's been my production designer for Knives and Skin and Night's End and Perpetrator. Same thing with Kate Grube, who is the costume designer for all of those films as well. They get the script, and then then we have a conversation where they have some questions, about the characters, about other aspects of the story that are kind of like unheard and unseen, because they want to figure out, like, what is this person wearing? What does their apartment look like, or whatever. And then before they go out and make the costume or buy a prop or whatever, then it's also kind of like visiting the production office, where like there's pictures on the wall of like potential kind of costume looks or potential kind of like set looks, and I can kind of say like, no, it's more this direction than that direction. So it's a really a little bit like getting the big picture, and then you kind of like whittle it down, whittle it down, whittle it down. But it's also, I mean, at the end of the day, it isn't, you're right. It's not a control thing, but it's also because I wrote it, and it's not even something that I have to have written, because Night's End I didn't write, but it's like, I think that I can have an idea of what the tone and the texture of the whole thing feels like. So, the costume department is thinking about costumes, production design is doing that, the art department is, doing, and so they're focused on their areas, but I can see the kind of whole thing to sort of understand how all of those different departments will come together to make something that feels like tonally and texturally, the palette, it all matches. And they what I like about working, especially with like Kate and Audrey in particular, is that maybe even they put a look together for one of the characters, and she's in costume and ready to go. I'm like, oh, I hate it. Like, or that's top is not right. And nobody
Yeah,
is
sure.
like, no one's like, well, forget you, like, we're out of here. They're kind of just like, okay, let's go look. And like, the people who I work with are also
fix it, or-
problem
Yeah.
solvers,
Mhm.
Same thing. Like, sometimes Audrey will put together this whole room with her department, and I walk in, I'm just kind of like, oh, huh, this isn't quite what I thought. Let's like think about this. And nobody has a problem like moving a lamp, just fixing, like figuring it out, because we're all in service to the story. And when you start shooting, it's not even my story anymore. Like, it's not about my ego. I'm kind of like, it's like Johnny's story. It's Hildy's house. Like, how are we in service to the story and to those characters? And at the same time, for instance, like Perpetrator, Seb and I were very, and Sebdia Castrati is the woman who is the director of photography for Perpetrator. And she and I were really inspired by the wallpaper in Saint Maud by Rose Glass, a beautiful film. And so we were like,
Yes, it's a great film.
we need some wallpaper, and Audrey was like, oh my God, like wallpaper is it's expensive and it's hard to put up,
Yeah.
and Sev and I were a really good team because I could play very like Midwestern, like aw shucks, when and Audrey grew up in Chicago as well. But, when we would go to Audrey and say, we'd love to have some wallpaper, for like Hildy's bedroom, Audrey was like, oh God, wallpaper. And I would just be like, well, I guess no wallpaper, and then Sev would just be like, we got to have the wallpaper, like very kind of
Mhm.
low, very thick Baltic accent, and Balkan accent rather. And,
Mhm.
Audrey would be like, gosh, all right. And then like the next day we would like beautiful big sheets of like wild wallpaper would show up, So it's also like this whole it's not like no one ever gets frustrated, but
Mhm.
it's just like this, it's like a wave pool, like not everybody can kind of like be at the crest at the same time. Some people are kind of like, oh God, like I'm drowning in what's happening right now. And then but it all is like part of the same kind of
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
And very collaborative. It sounds like everyone has
Totally
different roles,
collaborative.
and everyone is willing to pitch in, like with the wallpaper example, everyone is
Yeah,
willing to,
yeah.
I love that being in service to the story. Once it
Yeah.
gets started, it's the
yes,
story kind of taking a life of its own and becoming its own thing. That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, and sometimes,
agreed. Yeah.
you have to really, you lose a location. And, with a like a with an indie film, you can't, it's like that story, Sisyphus, the kind of like the kind of like, is it the rock going up the hill or down the hill? Anyway, it's a situation nobody wants to be in.
Yes,
Like
of course.
once
Yeah.
the thing starts moving, nobody it gets to sort of like sulk for more than like
Mm.
90 seconds. Then you have to move on and
Mhm.
fix the problem. And you lose locations, you lose actors, or you have to really flip it and think how to fix it. But again, you have to fix it in service to um always in service to the story. And at that point, like like I said, once we're shooting, it's not me anymore. It's like the story is itself. And I feel like I'm just kind of the kind of conductor, both in terms of like a train and an orchestra, just kind of
Yeah.
trying to keep everything moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. It sort of takes on a life of its own, and almost there's an evolution that happens that you are
Hmm.
conducting, but not necessarily controlling 100%.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I love that. Let's see. I want to ask a little bit about the effects because I
Hmm.
love the shape shifting facial effects that they see in the mirrors. So
Hmm.
there's that. I want to ask how you accomplish that. And there's also a lot of blood in
Hmm.
Perpetrator. What was it like working with so much blood?
Well, I actually didn't realize until the reviews started coming out that there was like a lot of blood in the film. Like, I mean, I guess I had written, a lot of blood scenes, but
Yeah.
I didn't really think that there was so much blood. I mean, I wanted Johnny's body to be magic. I wanted her blood to be magic. So, I mean,
Mhm.
not all of the blood scenes were written in the script. That was not like it was not an accident, but
Okay.
and we definitely like Movie Notebook, maybe within this past year, had done a whole kind of spread about blood in films. And so I got interviewed for that and got to give some, different recipes for the different bloods because
Oh,
there
cool.
was like
Yeah.
probably 5 or 6 different recipes for blood in Perpetrator. And also the blood reacted to the cold. Like there were a couple times when we were trying to get blood to like drip in a very uniform way, and it kind of came out like chili or something, or a jam, because it was like really cold. And I was like, oh God, how do we know we have to warm the blood up? Like, what are we doing here? Um, so yeah, so working with all that blood was cool. And we went through a lot of recipes that didn't work, like trying to make blood feel like it had like menstrual blood can be really clumpy, just if any of your listeners have learned one thing today, it is that, menstrual blood is like lumpy and clumpy, and that
Yes.
like unlike commercials on TV, it is not transparent and pale blue. It is
Really?
it is indeed a dark red and clumpy and
Oh
lumpy.
my.
So
Yes.
there were like some of the menstrual blood recipes. The people like the art department put like onion chips or like cotton balls and Vaseline.
Oh.
I mean, we eventually figured out
Hmm.
the right recipe, which is still going to be a secret to our crew. Some of that stuff did not work. I was like, why do we have like a whole bag of onion chips? Like what? And they're like, oh, it's the menstrual blood. And I was like, okay, carry on. Um,
I
and
trust
then,
what you're doing. Yes.
yeah, right, totally. And then, so the facial effects. So we worked with a very small group of VFX artists whose specialty are deep fakes.
Oh.
So they
Oh,
were doing a bunch of deep fakes, and it was a company that was run by this guy who Sev, the DOP, had gone to AFI with. And so, we were able to say, like, we want these kind of like sort of facial mapping, but it can't be perfect. She's trying to kind of like tune in, the face. And so
yeah.
it's not quite perfect. And that was a long time it took a long time to get it right. Like we would get tests from the VFX crew where like the nose was right, but the eyes were wrong, so the
Okay.
VFX were the last thing to sort of come in, which is not uncommon necessarily.
Hmm.
But we had to really explain, what that she had this like super empathy that would allow her not just to feel someone else's feelings, but like to kind of look like somebody else. And yet it was a brand new thing that she had developed, so she doesn't quite know how to control it yet. And we eventually got there, and I love that, those effects feel really uncanny when it happens.
Yeah, and very unique. And when you first start to see it, like I just rewatched it this week, you start to question, like, what did I just see? And
Hmm.
then the
That's
more it
exactly.
happens, it's yeah, yeah. Tim, what did you think? The same?
Yeah, same thing. The first time I was like, wait, did his face? Yep, yep.
Hmm.
Oh, it's so good. Um, well, I have a couple more questions. Tim, how about you? Jennifer, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, and we do want to get to the this or that segment, which is usually kind of fun. But
Cool.
Tim, I'll turn it
I
over
can
to
do
you.
one
Do
or
you have?
two. I got one or
Oh,
two more.
yeah, perfect. Go for it.
My next one is about how do you balance your tone in the
Mm.
movie, balancing between horror, some humor injected in there.
Mhm.
How do you make sure it's balanced while keeping the audience, uh, while building tension, I should say.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that's also such a good question because I'm not sure. I feel like I grew up in a family where sort of dark and awkward humor was just a consistent. And I know that not everybody grew up in that family, that kind of a family.
Mm.
I grew up in a family also of like my mom, who's 94, would never say that she's a cinephile, but she was someone who, from a very young age, I was watching, she procured a copy of, Hitchcock's Rebecca on VHS and was like, oh, we're going to watch this a lot. Or the first time that my parents got like a kind of a cable TV, they got a 24-hour access to the 80s iteration of a Invasion of the Body Snatchers. They wanted to make sure they really got their money's worth. So my mom was like,
Yeah.
we're watching it
It's an amazing movie.
all day. We kind of watch. I mean, I was like, okay, like I really grew up in kind of an oddly awkward, dark humor kind of cinephile family that even leaned into sort of like watching kind of like darker films. Um, but so that's to say that uh, I uh, my sense of humor or my sense of what is scary, if it feels also really personal. And so it's again where I have to kind of like read the room and be like, is that funny? Is that funny just to me? Or does that feel universally funny? And again, like it doesn't, for instance, like going back to even casting Christopher Lowell, he was like, God, that scene is, that scene in in the classroom where, Principal Burke is doing the kind of the drill for the school shooting, he's
Hmm.
like, it's both, that's so awkward and funny, but tough and all of that stuff. Like, what are you thinking there, I mean, he got it and he really liked it. And I would say that scene in particular came out of, I mean, I have three children. And at some point I said to one of my kids, I was like, what's the directive for like an active shooter drill? Like, do you guys have active shooter drills? And he's like, yeah. And I said, so what are you guys told to do? And he just said, hide.
Mhm.
And I was, as a parent, I was like, hide, like that's the best we can do. And so I wanted to take the absurdity of that real heartbreak and kind of
Hmm.
like extend that to its most kind of satirical place,
Mhm.
you know? And and it was funny, like that scene in particular, before we shot it, there were some of the producers were like, do you feel like it's tonally, is this too much, you know? And I said, no, I stand by it. I stand by this scene. I think it's gonna work. I think it's gonna resonate. And if anybody wants to like come at
Hmm.
me, bro, then I can say like, hey, like I have children and I have taught at a big public university where our our directive is
Yeah.
also just kind of like, I don't know, lock the door. Like we just still don't know how to deal with,
What to
violence.
do. Yeah.
Correct. And so,
Hmm.
um, yeah, sometimes it's like uh, I stand by it no matter what. If nobody else gets the joke, I'm just kind of like, no, come on, let's leave it in there. And then sometimes I have to rethink it. And but sometimes I don't know where a joke will land. And then, both Knives and Skin and Perpetrator premiered at the Berlin Film Festival, which of course is normally like an audience where English is not the first language. So they're always kind of like, okay, well, this should be interesting if any of these jokes land.
Yeah.
And in both instances, and I sat in both of those premieres that were both sold out to like, capacity 1,000 seat theaters,
Wow.
and
Congratulations.
people laugh all the way through. They just laugh all the way through. And which is really, I don't consider what I do like necessarily that kind of conventional like horror comedy. Um, I I don't, I'm not sure how, it's more like campy. I think that's my agent's always like, what are you doing? Like kind of
Yeah.
noir camp or something like that. So the the humor leans more towards a kind of John Waters, I don't know,
Hmm.
kind of intellectual, campy humor than something that's like knee slapping humor. But
Right.
again, going back to kind of like if you can get into the frequency, then you can, find it um find it funny. And I think there's lots of I always in every single scene, I feel like there's a line or a moment that is just like kind of bends a little bit or is awkward enough that to me is like that's where the humor is.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I will say that your films are very stylistically unique. Now that I've seen them all,
Hmm.
I really like sort of the worlds that you create. I heard in another interview that your films seem lawless, but there actually are
Mm.
some laws that you abide by. But from at first glance, I guess I would say there does seem to be a lawless quality. But I love the unexpected nature of your films. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to give some praise for a
Hmm.
moment. But my next question is, how would you, for those who are watching and haven't seen Perpetrator or perhaps your other films, how would you describe Perpetrator, perhaps using other movies? Like, how would you pitch Perpetrator, like Alien versus Predator, something like
Mm-mm.
that?
So I would say that I was really, even though I love Cat People, especially the 80s iteration of Cat People was really
Yes.
in my brain when I was watching this. I styled Alicia Silverstone very specifically after the Catherine Deneuve character in The Hunger, film from 1983 with
Oh
David Bowie,
yeah. Yes.
where and Susan Sarandon, where
Susan Sarandon.
she
Yeah.
was like an kind of an immortal.
Hmm.
And she's this kind of like very cool Hitchcockian sort of blonde, even though Tony Scott directed that. Um,
It's a great film.
and I love, so I think, there's something about the hunger that is related to Perpetrator. I mean, that's a very,
Mhm.
it's a sort of it's kind of a slower film. Um, but it you get there eventually, and I think that
Yeah.
there's parts of that in Perpetrator. Um, I mean, I am my films are often compared to David Lynch and David Cronenberg, my Uncle David's.
I love that.
Which
Yes.
I
Mhm.
totally also accept. I mean, there's something, I mean, Lost Highway is actually my favorite David Lynch film. I love
So
that
good.
kind of shifting that happens the minute that Patricia Arquette like, turns over in bed and her face is Robert Blake. I mean, like that's so uncanny and brilliant. Or the way
Yes.
that, Bill Pullman turns into Balthazar Getty, in the jail. Like it's that Lost Highway, there's a lot of that kind of doppelganger
Hmm.
aspect of Lost Highway in particular that I thought about for Perpetrator. And then, Cronenberg Scanners, I watched a lot, which is also very
Yes.
is very like a kind of deep, empathetic, like, someone really tapping into to somebody else's kind of energy. So I would say
Hmm.
if you liked Scanners, Lost Highway, or The Hunger, which are maybe still kind of obscure obscure films on someone's list, then yeah, then check out Perpetrator.
I think that those are perfect films and perfectly describe what's in store if you watch Perpetrator. Um, let's see. I do want to ask about what's next for you, but Tim, I wanted to give you one last
No, you can
opportunity
go
to
ahead.
ask him. Okay,
Let's. I
so
have that one on my list too. So,
okay, perfect.
so
So
yep.
now moving on a little bit from Perpetrator, which, like I
Mhm.
said, is streaming on Shudder, and you can get a physical copy from Arrow Video coming out soon. What's next for
Also
you?
the Arrow
Yeah,
Video Blu-ray has a bunch of extras too. So Seven, I do a
awesome.
commentary. So the DP and I do a video, like a commentary over it. And then there's also, I think, five of my short films that are included on there. Plus, there's also like a video
Oh,
essay that kind of compares Perpetrator and some scenes to other films. And there's another like other essay. There's a ton of extras for so anyone who's not even a fan of mine, but if you are just a kind of cinephile in general, there's some really cool extras that I feel so uh and I feel deeply loved by that Arrow team. Like
yes, that's
they really,
amazing.
have treated me very well with this Blu-ray release.
That is
They
awesome.
they do it right. Their
All right,
editions are amazing.
what's up next for me?
Yes, what's next? Yes.
Well, so I've got like two new scripts that are sort of like getting one has got cast attached and we're looking for financing. The kind of industry is very sluggish right now. I think kind of like not just post COVID, but post sort of like actors and writers strikes as it should be and sort of like streaming, questions, etc. So I'm being
Mhm.
patient. And that one is a kind of a supernatural um, slasher, which I haven't necessarily done before. And it's an adaptation of a short
Oh,
story by the American novelist Juliana Baggett, who's just fantastic, who's amazing about a um, a wife, mother, community leader, real estate agent who kills herself in a house that she's staging. And then the kind of like the Babadook, like the grief and guilt around her
Mm.
tragic death kind of builds this like mother monster that starts terrorizing the neighborhood. So it's nuanced,
That's incredible.
but it's also like righteous kind of slashing. And yet it also does, there's also kind of that awkward, my kind of brand of awkward humor around how people react after a death, like the weird casseroles that people bring to
Mm.
the family after, or the way that people
Yes.
sort of like vie for kind of like, well, you didn't know her as well as I knew her, or whatever. Like this, this kind of a thing.
Mm.
Um, like
Yeah.
that, which I find funny, I mean, it's not
Mm.
that kind of knee slapping funny, but and it's
Mm.
also a really tender story about sort of like a girl in her 20s, that's the daughter of the woman who kills herself, kind of dealing with like, the death of her mother, and her father is just despondent, kind of doesn't know how to what to do. So it's got this like great proper, righteous scares and kills with a kind of supernatural slasher, but then there's also another kind of tenderness around just grief, which is also, well, I explored that a lot in Knives and Skin. And then I also wrote a very gnarly female-led action story that's kind of like La Femme Nikita meets
My God.
History of Violence. Oof, there's a moth in here. So which is not, it's like which I'd been looking for a long time, a really gnarly action story. And I told my manager, my agent, like during COVID, I was like, send me something brutal, like give me just, I want to do something that feels really like a feminist kind of John Wick, give me something stunts
Yeah. Yeah.
and everything I got was kind of terrible. It was like, Clarice Starling meets blah blah blah, and I was just like, leave
Yeah.
Clarice Starling alone, you guys. Like she, she's had her day.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
it's just like people, like I think that people don't know how to deal with like, women assassins very well because there just haven't been very
Yeah.
many. And Greg Chambay, again with What the Films, who I had mentioned, who is a producer on Perpetrator, was like, well, why don't you just write your own? And I don't know why that hadn't occurred to me before. I was like, oh, right. Yeah, right. Like I can just write my own. And so I've got this other script that feels like, again, yeah, it's like a kind of a La Femme Nikita meets A History of Violence. I was inspired by this idea of the real life story of the Charles Starkweather murders that inspired Badlands and Natural Born Killers. Like that, like
Yes.
if we sort of like if we met that the young woman who he kind of brought along on his killing spree, if we met her like in her 50s, after she had sort of become a kind of government operative, we meet
Mhm.
her living her kind of like quiet life, and she gets pulled out, 30 years later to do kind of like one more mission. What does that look like? But
Yes.
again, it's like, it's got kind of like um my brand of, I don't know, just humor and
I can't wait.
sort of like and kind of weirdness and but yeah, so those guys. And then there's some other stuff. I mean, I just came back from I spent a week in New Mexico um doing some research for a script that I have not started writing yet, about a group of non-corporeal aliens who host in the bodies of exotic dancers, and
Gosh.
the portal to and from their home planet is in a strip club in New Mexico. It was sort of
Wow.
inspired by the my love-hate relationship with Under the Skin,
Mm.
where I
A
feel
great
like
film. Yeah.
I mean, it's a
But
great film, but
yeah.
also it's like problematic. It's like a little bit like kind of like
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
it's like a lot of guys gazing at Scarlett Johansson, not out like what a
Yes.
girl alien's life would be like, so it's a little
Mm.
love. So I was kind of like, I'm gonna write my own like kind of girl alien story, and yeah. So anyway, I had a great time.
Oh my
Sev,
gosh.
again, Sev, who was the DP for Perpetrator, I talked her into meeting me in New Mexico, and we just took this like week long like road trip. You know, two girls, one car, one camera. We shot a bunch of footage, talked to a bunch of people about aliens and strippers, and so that's
Oh
my
my God.
the rest of my
I,
the
Watch
rest of
that
my
Hanky
summer.
Panky.
The rest of my
yeah.
summer is gonna look like that. Mhm.
I just have to say, you had me at like supernatural slasher, then you went to gnarly action, and then alien strippers. Oh
Strippers,
my
come
God.
on, come
I
on.
They all
can't
sound so
wait.
good.
Yeah, I can't wait to see your spin on all of those.
Yeah,
Um, all right, let's jump into this or that. So, like I
great,
said,
great,
it's usually kind of fun. There's no right or wrong answer. Just give you two options and you pick one or the other.
great.
So the first one is Carrie from 1976 or Ginger Snaps from 2000.
Carrie, easy.
Yeah, it's an easy one. Tim, over to you.
Oh, sorry. I don't have it pulled up. Give me.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. The next one is Jump Scares or Slow Burn Dread.
Oh, slow burn dread.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd go with that too. Tim, let me know when you're ready. The next one is The Others, Nicole Kidman, or The Sixth Sense, I See
Mm,
Dead People.
the others.
Yeah, I think I'd go with that too. Let's see, psychological horror or body horror.
That's tougher.
I think to right this minute, I would say body horror.
Okay, fair
I
enough.
got an answer.
Today, I would say today body horror is my
Today, yes.
answer.
Tomorrow could be something else.
Mhm.
Tim, do you have Tim, are you
Yep.
ready? Okay, I'll let you go.
Heathers or The Craft?
Oh, Heather's. I, I don't have to
Mhm.
justify it, but can I just say that
Just go for it.
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and one of my first jobs was working at a movie theater. Or my first adult job was working at a movie theater, like an art house movie theater. And
Mhm.
and I think the like right when I got hired, we were screening Heathers, and it was so popular. It went on for like 12 weeks. It was just and eventually people would come in costumes and all this kind of stuff. So I have such a I mean, I love that film so much, but I have a soft spot for it. And even though
Mhm.
I've become good friends with Robin Tunney, who's like, you know, the star of The Craft, I'm gonna still have to go with Heathers.
Yes, I do love Heather's. My first exposure to that, my mother had rented it on VHS and it
Hmm.
was just on the table. I was like, oh, it's probably some drama, but I've got nothing else to do. And I put it in. Oh my God. I was like, this movie's amazing.
Hmm.
Anyway, Tim, do you want to do the next one since I started off with the first few?
David Cronenberg or John Carpenter?
Oh, Cronenberg.
Yeah. Let's see. Movies here. Picnic at Hanging Rock or Donnie Darko.
Oh, Donnie Darko.
Yeah, I love
Hmm.
that one too.
Hmm.
Okay. Decade 70s horror or 80s horror?
I think 70s horror because I feel like there's
Yeah.
like it still has a little bit of that like giallo influence.
Mhm.
You know, it
Mhm.
still has it's still yeah, I don't know. I think visually this like 70s horror is still coming out of a kind of a European sensibility of blood and dread.
Mhm.
Yes, yes, and not as campy. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'd go
Hmm.
there too. Let's see, modern movies here, Crimes of the Future or Titan?
Oh, Titan. I love Titan. I think that's really a
Yeah,
masterpiece.
yeah, I do too.
All right. Writing in silence or with music playing?
I mean, I'm gonna have a third option, which is like a movie playing on my TV in
Okay.
front of me while I'm watching.
Oh,
I shouldn't
yeah.
sort of like I think that's like the news is playing in the background right here, but oh my God, I'm always like I don't like write films here where it's at a desk where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah,
I like to write like on the couch where there's like a movie playing on my TV in front of me.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
no,
can relate to that.
never silence. If there's always
Never silent.
something, but it's not music. I like to have a film playing in the background.
Yeah, awesome. So just a few more. Midsummer or The Wicker Man from
Oh
1973.
my gosh, this is such a good question because I just watched The Wicker Man, and God, yes, Wicker Man. I don't know why
It's
I hadn't seen that before, but I watched it for the first time like maybe
oh, so good.
like
Yeah,
2 months ago. And
yeah.
I mean, I love parts of Midsummer so much, but Wicker Man was just like blew my brain apart.
Yes, yes. And don't watch the new one, the remake with Nicolas
No, no,
Cage.
no.
It's
No,
it's
no, no.
the
The 70s
the
one.
the original.
Christopher Lee. Is that who's like
Yes,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
yeah,
Christopher Lee.
yeah.
The Nick
yeah, for
Cage one is
sure.
great in its own right.
What's that?
Nick Cage one is great in its own way.
Oh,
Totally.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay.
okay.
There you go. All
All
right,
right.
two more. Go ahead, Tim.
Streaming release or theatrical premiere?
Oh, theatrical.
Mhm,
I mean, I think even as like a filmmaker, as nice as it is to have like to know what your distribution plan is through a streamer like Shudder, who I love the Shudder family.
mhm.
Um, there's nothing like being able to experience a film that you've made or a film that you just want to watch with a whole group of people, you know?
Yeah,
And it's like
big
the
screen.
lights go down,
Mhm.
you experience it all together. You hear the gasps, you hear the screams, maybe somebody barfs or not, I don't know. And the lights go on, and you've experienced something together. And so
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
theatrical for sure.
Okay, one more question, and that is the Halloween franchise or the Jaws franchise?
Oh, Halloween.
Yeah, for
Halloween,
sure.
hands down.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
I'm a big, yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis from day one. I just heard her do an
Mm.
Instagram. I just watched on Instagram, but do a talking about getting the part of playing, Laurie and
Yeah, Laurie Strode. Yeah,
in that Halloween. And I mean, that's my favorite still of the Halloweens. The first one is my favorite, but yeah, Halloween all
excellent.
day.
Yes, me too. It's my favorite film, so I support that answer. Jennifer, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for chatting with us today about Perpetrator and all of your other films. Like I said, you can watch them on Shudder. And my very last question for you is, how can folks find you on social media?
So I am on Instagram as the Jennifer Reader. I am also on Ye Old Facebook. I am on Blue Sky, I think also as the Jennifer Reader, perhaps.
Okay.
And I'm also, you can see almost every one of my short films on Vimeo, my Vimeo page for free. That feels
Oh,
really important, even though I've had through the years my films on the Criterion channel, which I love being able to say that, but you can also watch those exact same films on my Vimeo page for free.
give me the link and I'll put it in the description.
I will, because
Yes.
short films are people too.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Let's see. So if you are watching, like and subscribe because it helps our channel. And Tim, thank you as well for joining from the Average Reviews podcast. And like I said, you're the organizer of the Dread broadcast. And Jennifer, one last time, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks, Aaron and Tim. Thank you both so much.
Yeah,
This is fun.
This was fun.
awesome.
Bye, everyone.